What is up, Pal Fam, and welcome to Game 2 of our post-game analysis of the Women's World Chess Championship between the world champion Zhu Wenjun and the challenger Tan Zhongyi. My name is Paul Emmanuel Abradas, aka Paul Bao, alongside with my friend once again, Jules. And this time,
Hello,
Hello! How are you doing right now?
I'm doing well.
Doing well? That's good to hear. So now, we're on Game 2. It's just recently concluded. It took them around 4.5 hours for a game to end. Unlike last time, I think it was just 38 moves. King G2 wasn't counted apparently, as per FIDE recap on their socials. But who knows? All right, let's begin. So let's find out how did this game goes on. Tan Zhongyi opened the game with c4, knight f6, and then knight c3, e5, knight f3, knight c6, g3, d5, takes, and then bishop g2, bishop c5, and castles. Okay, so it seems interesting right now in this opening. Let me know when you
Yep.
let me know when you need to think about what move, like something like that. All right, d3, h6, and then knight takes, queen takes, bishop d2, queen d6, bishop c3, queen to e7, knight d2, knight
I
d.
think that
Yep.
um I think that we can see that the opening is kind of straightforward, honestly, for both sides.
Uh huh.
Um if we go back to the some of the very first moves,
From the
we
opening.
could see that uh you could see that um obviously it was gonna be the Indian, but uh it changed, and so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it started becoming like they started to what do you call this? They, developed some pieces. They uh it was a pretty straightforward opening, kind of passive aggressive, honestly. And yeah,
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a good point. Okay, where did we end? I think where did we stop? Knight d bishop d2 or
I,
knight
I like I think we were
right here?
yeah, we were there, yeah, right
Okay.
there.
Okay, let's go back.
Yeah.
So after this move, Tan Zhongyi moved e3 and then knight to b5 and then a4 and then they exchange. But then there's now an isolated pawn right here. I think of those. But yeah, there's like so many pawns that are connected, while this pawn on a4 is just an
But
isolated
if you
pawn.
look at it, the C, D, and E files are really connected together.
Along with f, g,
I
and h.
Yeah, as well as F, G, and H as well. It's just that the only if you look at in the A file, that A pawn is really sad looking
Mm-hmm.
because if you no notice how all of the other files are together, the B file pawn isn't there anymore, and the A file pawn is just sad. It's just right there.
Oh, whoops.
Um.
Oh, wait a
Oh,
second. Where did it go?
so if we're gonna look back at these files, the C, D, and E files are really connected, as well as the F, G, and H pawns.
Mm-hmm.
They're standing by each other, making sure that they're there for each other. The bishop is really happy, just staying there inside the G2 square. The only problem is really it's the A4 pawn.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is just a
it's
problem, the
it's just
a4 pawn.
isolated. It's just standing there. Yeah, it's really sad looking. Honestly, it should not be a surprise to see some action in the CD and E files,
Mm-hmm.
especially surrounding the white pawns. There you should expect some pushing of pawns in the CD and E files some other time. Or maybe even the F pawn, but I wouldn't expect that to
So what you
happen.
would have moved if you were I think
It
it's Black's turn by the way. Oh yeah, I forgot. Alright. So C6 was the move after B takes and then A5.
Also now here. now that we can tell why uh we can now tell why A4 was left to stay there,
Mm-hmm.
because now the isolation of A4 is now justified, as obviously there Tan Zhongyi is trying to like solidify her position on the queen side.
Uh-huh.
Let's just see where this pawn goes. Yeah, it's also possible for the queen to also go to G7 and try to attack some
Like this.
pieces. That's also, yeah, it's
And
also possible.
threatening the d3. Alright, let's go back. So a5, bishop to d7, queen b3, rook a b8, knight e4, bishop d6, and then they exchange. So they're now down to one, and then pawn is the pawn on d3 is a bit in danger. I believe that I can go c4 for this to protect this.
C4 is a really good move. Yeah, I would have gone there too.
And then if I would be Ju and Jun, she'll just go bishop f5 and then e4. More defense around like here.
Alternatively, you could just Alternatively, you could also put the rooks on the center files, honestly.
Oh yeah,
But
like
either
bishop
move,
f5, rook
either
a
moves are
d1.
okay. Yeah.
You. That's interesting choice. All right, let's go back to d4. But apparently, Ju and Jun made a move which is b6. I mean, after queen takes and then d4 and then
So
b6.
there it is. That's the that's the move I was talking about when it comes to the CD and E files. I was really expecting some D pawn to be pushed at some time of the game. There it is. Yeah,
There it is, of
D4,
course,
and
because
then you see Ju and Jun's counterattacks by, pushing the B s- the B pawn to the B6 square, and then it's also possible that, yeah, you could also trade the queens, putting the queen on A3,
though it's good,
but
and I would ex- no. I would think of this thing
you
right now.
would take it.
Tension on d4. All right, let's go back.
Yeah.
So they both exchange, of course, and then rook a7, and then bishop e6.
Well, now you gotta move the queen,
Of course, queen a4,
obviously.
and then rook fc8, rook b1, bishop d5, and then they take the pawn. Wow, that's it. I'd say that's interesting. D takes
Oh,
e5.
yeah. It's
I'd
a switch and zug.
hmm.
It's a swish and zug. It's a in between move. Like you do something first before
Oh,
you
switch and Zun.
do what
Oh
you want
yeah.
to do.
So he's gotten
It's a switch and zug.
Dan Zhongyi gone the in between move, but then there's the pawn right now. Again, it's isolated, so it's like breaking the connected pawn.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting move there. I probably wouldn't have I probably would have kept the tension, but hey, it's already happened, so let's just see what happens next after this move.
Well, the switch and Zun goes with queen 6 and then queen d4, and this is where they exchange. But instead of further connecting it to have those one in the road right there, he just made two pawn island. She just made two pawn island. Huh.
But this is, I mean, obviously this is gonna be a risky position. If you take it with the C pawn,
All right, let's take a
if you
look.
took the queen with the C pawn, you could connect the pawns right there. You see the D, E, and F pawns really happy.
Like that.
Like you
Mm-hmm.
could see the diagonals. But the problem is there are two pawns on the B and C files, and
Uh-huh.
they might look a bit scary in the end, especially if they become passed,
Like this.
because yeah, they could just march around and, promote. And there's only just a single pawn that could stop them, which is the D4 pawn, which could kind of be a problem in the end. But if we come back and see, if you can see, going back to the original position,
All right, he takes.
Tan Zhongyi took with the E pawn.
Mm-hmm.
So the benefits of this is
Is it
it could control that. Yeah, it could control the pawns on the B and C files even more. That's the one I was talking about. But the only problem is, yeah, you're right. The pawns are no longer connected; they become islands. Aside from that, the more benefits is that the E file is open, so that could be a
might be an
potential
opportunity?
site for
Maybe
connecting
can
the
go
rooks
rook
on the same
e7,
file. Yeah, yeah.
or
What
in
are your opinions on
in the case
What
of
are your opinions on the move?
this move, e takes d4. I think yep, it's right to prevent much more of a passed pawn and opens this one right there, as you may have knew, and then yeah, that's more of it. Okay, let's go back. E takes d4 was the move, and then they exchanged bishops this time. Pawn to b5, rook e1, rook a8, rook e7, and then they exchange c5, king f3, and then they exchange again. Wait a second. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like a pass. No. Like, it might be go for a pass pawn, and he could have done like rook b7. I guess it could be rook b7 because if he takes it and then, well,
Yeah, that Rook B7 is a really good move.
that's a
Yeah,
pretty
you're
good
right.
choice.
It's a
Rook
it's a pretty good
b7. If I could have,
it's
if
a good choice, honestly.
yeah, rook b7, and if he
Like
goes rook to d8, takes and takes.
it would be a draw-ish position. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it would be a drawish
it would be a
position.
really good position. If
It would be
you
a
could get a
drawish.
draw in this position. Yeah, I agree.
Exactly.
You could definitely get a draw in this position.
You're right. But
So if you let's go back
to
and
c5.
see what the position is.
But
So aside from Rook B7, what other possible what other stuff can you say about this?
I guess that there's no choice now for white because no matter what, if he exchanges, if she exchanges, and if takes this, the pawn will march forward to b1. But if I could be the guessing one or something, I could say d5. The problem, it goes rook, and then if I go here, takes. But I also have another one, which is he could also take this one and then take this, and I can just go rook a5 because if he pushes it, if she pushes it there, the rook will be gone. So it's good to like take this one and take this one back. And additionally, the king cannot go to f3.
Yeah, that's a really good. I mean, in the end, it would be a draw-ish position. You could definitely draw in this position if you look back at it. So in the end, instead of that, Tanjong Yi decides to go, yeah, C5.
And then king
She
f3.
goes
No, it's
C5.
Ju and
Instead of
Jun
that, she
moving.
goes
Ju
King
and
F3.
that was Ju moving c5, and then Tan move knight f3, king f3,
Uh,
and then
so
they
instead of trying to do something about the position, yeah, she exposes her king and leaves it like, okay, okay, come on, come on, bring your worst. And that's exactly what happens. Come on. And now, what can you say about this, Kuya Paul?
so much so about this, but what? But then the sound. I mean, sorry, I was too distracted by those background noise. Anyway, the king. I mean, it's not much. We're just transitioning to an end game right now. This position is currently transitioning to an end game. So I believe it's now advantageous to take the king to the center and like put the king in play right now to the end game. But yeah, rook b7 is
Yeah.
recommended if I would have be playing as white. So after king f3, they takes and then king f8, rook b7, and then check, king e4, rook c2. Oh, I've seen that. I've been keeping an eye on this one before. So as you may have knew, this rook I mean, this pawn on b5 is about to be gone, but because he cannot go here
Yep.
because she cannot go there because she will lose the rook. So yep, hold up. So rook here is good for this. For rook c3 is good, and then king e4. I mean, she'll go here. I was expecting that she's gonna go rook b3. Like let's take a look at the action. Like this, and this. Rook to b3. I was highly expecting
Oh.
that because of this to like defend
Oh.
the pawn on
Oh yeah. You're actually
b5.
right.
But the
That seems like a really reasonable move.
however, I could have gone king here, and if I push pawn and then king goes in here, let's say, and then rook here. So he has no choice but to take this one and take this.
Oh
That's
yeah.
but I think that's a candidate move. I would say on the rook b3
The general problem is, um, yeah, it's hard to defend the pawn. It's hard to defend that one single B pawn for black, but for white, it's kind of hard to defend all three pawns that are right there in the F, G, and H pawns. Because even though they're connected, the F and H pawns can be, exposed to something. Because like, yeah, when you took the F pawn with that last analysis of yours, it really showed the vulnerability. Can we go back to that
where
move like rook takes f2?
rook c2. I mean, she
No, rook
hasn't.
takes f2.
Oh, this one.
Yeah.
All right.
I realized how vulnerable her position is. That's what I was talking about. It's the f, g, and h pawns. They're really even
They're
though they're
literally
connected.
vulnerable. Yeah, they're right now
Yeah.
vulnerable. Yeah. So instead,
Yeah, and that's the beauty of, yeah, that's what's cool about rook b3. You were definitely right with that move.
because she can take this one and then she can take this one and then pass pawn.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go back to rook c2, and then king e3, defending of course, and then rook check, king d2, rook f3, king e2, rook f5, king e3, h5, and f4. So it's a bit neck and neck right now. It's happening, I might say.
Yeah.
But then in this position, this is where Ju and June's game starts to go downhill on this game, this second game. Because here, Ju and June made a move, King E8, which apparently, according to the Take 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 app, it's a blunder, and this like the evaluation bar goes a bit higher and higher for Tan Zhong Yi.
Why is that?
So I believe that it says king e4 and then rook f6. She's gonna lose the rook on the pawn on b5. If I would have been me, I guess I can go g6 and then but then she's gonna hide it with d5 and lose the pawn anyway.
Oh,
So I
oh,
believe that
oh, you're right.
she didn't do rook to d5. And if what then rook to d5 is fine. And if she goes king on here. Yeah, same
Yeah, she
scenario.
loses that pawn.
Same
I think
scenario.
if we can we go back to that old position,
This one,
like king e8.
king e8,
No, wait, no, yeah, the f4. My bad.
king
Sorry,
e4,
f4.
f4. Okay.
No, f4. Pawn to f4. It's gonna be really hard to try to defend that pawn. So I think that. if ever White tries to find a way to like take away that rook, it's gonna be really hard to defend. So I think G6 pre-defending the rook is like I think that G6 pre-defends the rook already um just in case that White would want to attack Black's rook because as you've shown earlier, if anything were to happen to that rook, that pawn's gonna die. So
Exactly.
yeah, I think that defending that rook would be a really, really good idea. That's just me personally. But also, not only that, it also connects your pawns. Just like the F, G, and H pawns for the white side, you can also see that it's gonna be the same thing for the black side.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, as we've seen earlier, June unfortunately plays King E4
King e4. It's king e8.
and King E8. Oops.
Because you're a bit confused
Whoops.
on Tan Zhongyi and Ju Wenjun. Ju Wenjun is currently playing black in game. Well, I mean, Ju Wenjun
Yeah, my
played black.
bad.
Okay, King
That's the
e4.
first thing that's
That's the first thing.
yeah. There it is, yeah. That's the first thing that showed up for me, and sorry.
Alright. Rook f6 was the next move. And then rook takes b5. There's no choice, absolutely. And then g6, d5, rook a6, king to e5. So I think it's marching forward. This pawn is now marching forward.
It's that there, yeah, there's also another problem. Yeah, I think that G6 in the beginning should have probably like solidified that position because if the rook stayed there on the fifth rank, if we
Mm-hmm.
go back to like uh if we go back, can you go back to F4 please? Sorry.
f4, right there.
If that if that rook stayed
Oops.
on the fifth rank, uh if the rook stayed on the F on the if the rook stayed on the
Don't
fifth
don't
rank
worry. Don't no
and
pressure.
could have stayed there like sorry. Okay, let me say it again. Hold on.
All right, no pressure. No pressure.
Yeah, hold on. If that rook stayed on the fifth rank and could have been defended by what I said earlier, G6, that's what I
g6.
recommended. It would be pretty hard for the king to try to move up uh into the higher ranks, the
So.
sixth and seventh and the eighth ranks,
Mhm.
because of that rook. It would be really hard. Yeah, the king would want to maybe the king would have to travel to the D's, the C's, the B's, the A files, but it's gonna be really, really, it's gonna be really time consuming, and you don't want to spend that much time just trying to make your king go to something that's already really vulnerable. So yeah, that's the problem with the rook not being able to stay on the fifth rank. And now we can see that back to the original position with King E5.
That's exactly the point. Okay. So let's go
Yeah.
back to. So let's go back in where do we? I think it was King E5. All right, King E5. So Ju and Jun wants to put the king away, so she gives a check, and then King D4, Rook A2, King C5, and then takes the free pawn because there's absolutely no choice, and then Rook check, King D7, Rook B7, King C8, Rook G7. I have a feeling that this is about to be checkmate with us because of this. King goes in here, Rook pawn goes in here, and then checkmate right there, or if necessary, like when it's on there.
I think that Rook G7 has got to be like the glue for this winning formula for Tan Zhongyi because now that the king's stuck on the eighth rank, there's gonna be like it's gonna be about time that that king dies. So yeah, it's really Tan Zhongyi's uh Tan Zhongyi's ensuring moment of putting her rook on the seventh rank and keeping it there is really pivotal. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's a really smart move, and that's exactly what should have been done, and that's exactly what happened. So now Ju and Jun's gonna have a really, really hard time back and trying to put her back into the an okay position.
That's a good point. Alright, let's go back. G5 was the next move. So yep, there's no choice because there's no other pawns to be defended. It's just g5. So Tanjongi instead pushed forward the pawn to f5 and then h4, but takes this one. Huh. And then rook h7, and then there's now a tension all around with the d file and the h file right now.
Kuya Paul,
Yep,
for you, which because they are both fast pawns, they might look, equally scary, but of course it's not always the case and it really depends on the position. Based on the position, which is more scary or which is more important based on how what the position looks right now? The D5 pawn or the H4 pawn? Which is more important
more
right
important.
now? Or
eh,
which looks more likely to promote?
It's more likely to promote for the white side, the white, because there's like the king right there, and I believe that it's already a pass pawn. This rook cannot be moved anywhere. It's just only on h3 and h1, only here and here. While this pawn can move freely to these squares, as long as the king cannot go on these right there.
So yeah, we could safely say that Ju and Jun is not having a really good time. Even though they have the same material, it's not looking good for
Jew.
Ju and Jun at all
Yep,
in this position.
that's it. All right, let's go back. So h3, king to d6, king b8, king to whoops. Or we h3. Let's go back to h3. So king d6, king b8, king d7, king b7. Yeah, I I have a feeling on this because the endgame gauntlet around here, like let's say king d7 and then king b7, he she cannot move on here, and this pawn is about to move. Like that's one I'd say that this is one of my games on the tournament last weekend where I took this one right there. I was absolutely losing, but I came back. I'll just tell it more to you off cam. All right, so king b7 and then push pawn, of course. Rook, king b6, king d8, rook h1, d7, h2, rook to h3. I had actually a thought on here. Yeah, never mind. I believe that like I was having a plan on this, and then I came to realize she's gonna promote here, and then a promotion right there.
Yeah, it's almost not salvageable for black. Obviously, if white continues to make the right move, it's not salvageable for black in this position.
Yeah. All right.
So yeah,
Let's.
it's gonna be really hard to come back from this.
So rook to h3 was the next move, and then king b7, rook b3, king a7, rook b2, king a6, rook e2, king b7, king e7, and here Ju and Jun paused the clock and resigned.
Because you can't stop the pawn.
Exactly, but if the game would have been continued, it says rook d1, and then no, it's not. I can just like
You don't have to promote first.
take this
You can
one.
take the H
It's
pawn and
already
it's
the
will be
free
over.
free rook.
You yeah.
It's a, a free pawn.
You cannot stop that pawn. When it promotes, it's gonna be taken by the rook and then yeah, you can just get that you can just get the F6 pawn already.
I
It's
mean,
over
she can
for
just like do
black.
this and probably she can go there. But yes, it's already a winning game for Tan Zhongyi. But before we end, I had that one thing that came in mind while I was watching the live game. I was actually thinking that like she'll go right there to no. I mean after Rook B2. And then rook a6. I was actually thinking that the king will go right there, but I think that was a bad idea. I came to realize because the evaluation bar from the Women's World Championship website is like just goes up and down, and so on and so forth.
Oh, I think that you just need to, yeah, I think that honestly, Rook E2 doesn't look doesn't look like it does something, but it actually really does solidify your position. Like it makes sure that uh that rook stays on the second rank and that the poor rook on H1 has limited space for it to go any somewhere. And
Yeah,
so that the king can't travel to the E file in case it wants to chase the pawn.
exactly. But for me, I can. I mean, king b7. I mean, I just came to realize I was thinking about king e8. Oh gosh, so much noise. All right, anyway, king e8, and then I was like thinking like she's gonna go rook d1 and not a promotion, but to take this one first. And if he takes this, yep. I was thinking about king e8 after all too.
It would still be over.
Yeah, it's still already over. Wow. So that was the game that took them 4.5 hours and 62 moves for Tan Zhongyi to lead the series 1.5 to 1/2. What a game! But we're gonna find out on Sunday for we're gonna find out on Sunday how can Ju and Jun recover from this painful defeat of round two, of game two rather, and find out how can she tie the series, or will Tan Zhongyi continue the lead and probably go with a flow. So yeah, tomorrow will be the rest day, and on Sunday will be game number 3 of the Women's World Chess Championship. You can watch it live on Fides YouTube channel. That's Fide Chess, and yeah, and to conclude, I want to say thank you again to my good friend Jules for joining us again, and hopefully we can do this again on Sunday because tomorrow is a rest day.
I'm not sure if I can, but
Yeah, but
I'll
that's
try.
fine. That's fine. That's fine. Of course, it's a Sunday and things are onto something. All right. That's it for us. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe on our YouTube and follow our Facebook. Yep, there's a lot of noise again. What's with this noise? Anyway, once again, subscribe to our YouTube and follow our Facebook. And for other stuff, for other Score 45 stuff, follow me on Twitch, X, Instagram, and Threads. But that's it for us and Jules. This has been Paul Emmanuel Alvaradas, aka Paul Bao, Arena FIDE Master, and 6-time Wheeler of the Week, saying goodbye for now. And this is the Women's World Chess Championship, where only one will reign.